Have you ever felt overwhelmed by a seemingly impossible challenge? Just like Nehemiah, who, upon hearing the sad news of the destruction of Jerusalem, felt the pain of loss and the desolation of his people, many of us face moments of crisis that leave us discouraged and without hope. But Nehemiah did not let himself be discouraged. He teaches us that, even in the most difficult situations, we can find strength and determination to act. By transforming his anguish into action, Nehemiah became an example of leadership and faith. He not only rebuilt the walls of the city, but also restored hope and identity to his people. Come and discover how this story of overcoming can touch your life, inspiring you to face your own challenges with courage and faith. Together, we will explore Nehemiah's journey and discover how his lessons still resonate today, offering a clear path to renewal and transformation. Before we begin this exciting journey through Nehemiah's story, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel. This way, you won't miss any of our inspiring stories and the powerful lessons we can learn together. By subscribing, you are joining a community that seeks growth, faith, and overcoming. So, hit the subscribe button and come with me to explore how Nehemiah teaches us to face challenges, find strength in hardships, and transform our pain into action. Let's go on this journey of renewal and transformation together. Nehemiah was an ordinary man, but he had a special position. He was the cupbearer to the powerful King Artaxerxes of Persia. To many, the position of cupbearer might seem simple, but at that time, it was one of the closest positions to the king. Nehemiah was responsible for tasting all the drinks the king consumed, to make sure nothing was poisoned. In other words, he risked his life every day for the king. But beyond that, the cupbearer was someone who was extremely trusted. He could hear the secrets of the court, see important decisions being made, and even, on rare occasions, offer advice to the king. Nehemiah was a Jewish man living in a foreign empire, but his faith and roots ran deep. He knew that his people, the Jews, had faced many challenges, and even far from his homeland, he maintained an unshakable love for Jerusalem, the holy city. Although he lived far away, his heart was always there. And he knew that his city was facing hard times. The Jewish people had been exiled from their land for many years, but over time, some began to return. However, the return was not easy. Jerusalem, the city of their ancestors, was in ruins. The walls that had once protected the city were destroyed, and the gates had been burned. Jerusalem, which had once been a symbol of glory and protection, was now vulnerable and exposed. Nehemiah knew all this, but one day, he received news that deeply affected him. One of his brothers and other men came from Jerusalem with a painful message. Those who had returned to the land were facing great hardship. The destroyed walls and burned gates meant that the city was unprotected, open to attack and contempt from enemies. Nehemiah felt a heavy weight on his heart. The news was like an open wound. He could not hide the sadness that filled his soul. Even though he lived a comfortable life in the palace, Nehemiah felt God's calling. He could no longer ignore the situation of his city and his people. Something in his spirit told him that he had to do something. And although he was in a position of security and favor with the king, Nehemiah knew that his duty went beyond the palace walls. He had a commitment to his people and to God. From that moment on, Nehemiah began to think about how he could help Jerusalem. He was convinced that even as a cupbearer, God could use him in ways he had never imagined. When Nehemiah received the devastating news about Jerusalem, he felt a heavy burden on his heart. Knowing that the situation required more than he could offer, Nehemiah turned to God in fasting and prayer for guidance. He began by extolling the greatness of God, acknowledging that the Lord was faithful and merciful to those who loved him. In an act of humility, Nehemiah confessed the sins of his people and his own, acknowledging that the ruin of Jerusalem had its roots in Israel's disobedience. Nehemiah then reminded God of the promises he had made to Moses, that even though the people were scattered, if they would repent and return to God, he would gather them back to the place he had chosen. And with faith and trust, Nehemiah made a bold request, that God grant him favor and success before King Artaxerxes, for he knew he would need the king's help to carry out the mission God had placed on his heart. Nehemiah knew that his heart was irrevocably tied to the fate of Jerusalem. After days of prayer and fasting, he realized that he needed King Artaxerxes' permission to leave his position as cupbearer and go to the ruined city. This request would not be easy, for the king was one of the most powerful men in the world, and the situation could be risky for Nehemiah. One day, while serving the king wine, Nehemiah could not hide his sadness. The king, noticing his distress, asked, "Why is your face sad, since you are not sick?" At that moment, Nehemiah felt his heart race. He was about to make a bold request that could cost him his life. However, instead of backing down, Nehemiah took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and answered sincerely, "May the king live forever. How could I not be sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" The king, touched by Nehemiah's sincerity, asked, "What do you want?" This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. With courage, Nehemiah asked for permission to go to Jerusalem and rebuild the city's walls. He also requested letters guaranteeing his safe passage and timber from the royal forests for the construction. Nehemiah knew he was making a bold request, but to his delight, the king agreed to everything he asked. He received the permission, resources, and protection he needed for the journey. This moment was a testament to Nehemiah's courage, who, trusting in God, decided to take on the challenge of asking the king for the impossible. With the king's favor and God's blessing, Nehemiah prepared to begin his mission of rebuilding Jerusalem. What do you think of Nehemiah's courage in making such a bold request to King Artaxerxes? Have you ever had to face a great challenge, even when everything seemed to be against you? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Let's discuss together how faith and determination can guide us through difficult situations, just as they did for Nehemiah. I look forward to hearing your stories and thoughts. With the permission and support of King Artaxerxes, Nehemiah was about to embark on a journey that would change the destiny of Jerusalem. He had received everything he needed: letters of assurance, resources for rebuilding, and above all, a clear purpose in his heart. Now, with faith and determination, Nehemiah set out from Susa, the capital of the Persian Empire, toward his homeland. The journey would not be easy. Nehemiah would face long distances and dangers along the way. He traveled through several provinces, taking roads he had only heard of, but always guided by a deep sense of mission. As he went, his heart filled with anticipation and concern. He knew that the people of Jerusalem were in need of leadership and hope, and this responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders. After days of traveling, Nehemiah finally arrived in Jerusalem. When he saw the city, he felt a surge of emotion. This was the place where his ancestors had lived, where the temple of God was located. But when he entered the city, the reality he found was bleak. The streets were filled with rubble, and the walls that had once protected the people lay in ruins, exposed to the threat of invaders. The pain he felt at seeing the city destroyed only reinforced his desire to work toward its restoration. Determined to act, Nehemiah waited a few days for his presence to be noticed. He needed to assess the situation before sharing his plans. At night, he set out to inspect the city walls. With a small company, he walked the dark streets, noting every broken section of the wall and every burned-out gate. The scene was even more devastating in the moonlight, and Nehemiah felt a deep sadness as he saw the city that should have been a symbol of strength and faith reduced to rubble. After this inspection, Nehemiah was ready to rally the people. He knew he could not do it alone. He needed the support and cooperation of everyone. When he finally addressed the leaders and residents of Jerusalem, he shared not only the gravity of the situation but also the vision God had placed on his heart. He told them of the favor he had received from King Artaxerxes and how, together, they could rebuild the walls and restore the city to its former glory. Nehemiah's words were powerful. He not only presented a plan, but he also inspired hope in every person present. The determination and passion he demonstrated motivated the people to rally together. They were ready to face the challenges ahead, armed with the courage Nehemiah had instilled in them. The journey that had begun with a heavy heart was now a step toward renewal and restoration. The city that had been in ruins had a chance to be reborn, and Nehemiah was determined to lead that transformation. As Nehemiah began to gather the people and work on rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, a shadow of opposition began to hang over his mission. Among his adversaries were Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite. These men did not look kindly on Nehemiah's efforts and the enthusiasm of the people. To them, the revitalization of Jerusalem posed a threat to their own power and influence in the region. As soon as news of the rebuilding spread, Sanballat became enraged. He could not bear the thought that Jerusalem, a city that had fallen into disrepair, could be restored. In his anger, he joined forces with Tobiah and began to make plans to stop Nehemiah's progress. They were not just critics, they were determined to discredit Nehemiah and his leadership, doing everything they could to demoralize the people. The mockery began. Sanballat and Tobiah, along with other enemies, began to taunt Nehemiah and the workers. "What are these feeble Jews doing?" they cried out. "Can you rebuild the destroyed walls? Even if a wolf comes, it will destroy what you are building." These scathing words were a direct attack on the courage and determination of the people. The taunts were both physical and psychological, trying to sow doubt and fear in the minds of the workers. But Nehemiah was undeterred. Rather than give in to anger or disillusionment, he chose to respond with faith and determination. He sought God in prayer and asked for the strength to carry on despite the threats. Nehemiah not only prayed, but he also organized his people. He instructed the workers to be vigilant and armed, ready to defend the construction if necessary. "Do not be afraid of them," he encouraged. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, for your sons, for your daughters, for your wives, and for your houses." With this determination, Nehemiah stirred a new fervor among the workers. Now armed and ready to face any attack, they were united and strengthened by faith. The taunts of Sanballat and Tobiah only served to further galvanize the people, who refused to let fear or mockery paralyze them. Rather than being defeated by their spiteful words, they found courage in their community and their mission. The opposition did not stop there. They planned direct attacks and attempts to destabilize the work, but Nehemiah and his people were prepared. Each time Sanballat and Tobiah tried to intimidate or demoralize, Nehemiah responded with greater determination and faith, proving that, united in purpose and fortified by God's grace, they were stronger than any opposition they faced. The rebuilding project continued, defying threats and showing that the determination of the people, under Nehemiah's leadership, was unshakable. As Nehemiah and the people of Jerusalem dedicated themselves to rebuilding the walls, internal problems began to arise that threatened the unity of the community. Although motivated, many workers were struggling financially, and tensions began to rise among them. The wealthy were exploiting the poor, charging excessive interest and demanding payment in exchange for food and loans. This created a climate of discontent, and complaints began to arise. The harmony that had emerged among the workers was threatened. Nehemiah, realizing the gravity of the situation, called an assembly to address the problem. He courageously stood up and spoke to everyone, emphasizing that the restoration of the walls was more than a physical task, it was an act of justice and unity. Nehemiah confronted the rich for their unjust actions, reminding them of God's principles of mercy. He demanded that they stop charging excessive interest and return the goods they had taken from the poor. Moved by Nehemiah's appeal, the people agreed to restore what was owed. This act of justice not only resolved grievances, but also brought a new sense of purpose and unity to the people. With division overcome, the work resumed with renewed vigor. Everyone realized that they were all in this together, determined to complete the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. Nehemiah turned the internal problems into an opportunity to strengthen the bonds of the community, reaffirming their identity as the people of God. Unity and solidarity prevailed, allowing the work to move forward with confidence and determination. If you are enjoying the story of Nehemiah and learning about courage and faith, don't forget to leave a like. Your support is very important and helps us bring you more inspiring content. So, if this message resonated with you, click the like button and show us that you are with us on this journey of transformation. Let's spread this inspiration together. After an intense period of work and overcoming internal challenges, Nehemiah and the people of Jerusalem were more determined than ever to complete the rebuilding of the city walls. The unity they had found, even in the face of hardship, became a powerful source of motivation. Everyone knew they were involved in an important task, a mission that would not only restore the security of Jerusalem but also strengthen its identity as God's people. With renewed focus, the work accelerated. Each group, assigned by Nehemiah, devoted themselves diligently to their section of the wall. The sun was shining brightly, but the heat did not discourage the workers. They were armed with simple tools, but their hearts were filled with hope and determination. The stones were raised, the holes were filled, and the gates were restored, all under the watchful leadership of Nehemiah, who encouraged everyone to persevere. With each passing day, progress was evident. The sections of the wall were coming together, and what had once been a pile of rubble began to form into a solid, imposing structure. People gathered around to see what they had accomplished together, and murmurs of satisfaction and joy filled the air. Nehemiah made sure that the work was done with quality, overseeing every detail and ensuring that the workers were motivated. Completing the wall was not just a matter of rebuilding, it was a test of the faith and resilience of the people. Nehemiah knew that time was of the essence, for the city needed to be restored before opposition from enemies like Sanballat and Tobiah intensified again. With this in mind, he organized shifts so that the work never stopped. While some were on the battlefield fighting fatigue, others took turns to ensure that the work continued at a rapid pace. Amazingly, the wall was completed in record time. In just 52 days, what had seemed like an impossible task had become a reality. News of its completion spread quickly, and the city was filled with joy and celebration. The people gathered to see the fruit of their joint efforts, marveling at the strength and beauty of the wall that now surrounded Jerusalem. Nehemiah felt a surge of gratitude as he looked upon the completed wall. He knew that this achievement was a testament to the power of God and the determination of the people. The wall was not just a physical structure, it was a symbol of hope and renewal. The people had come together not just to rebuild walls, but to reaffirm their identity and faith. The completion of the wall brought a new sense of security and dignity to the people of Jerusalem. They were ready to face the future, knowing that together they could overcome any challenge. The work that had begun with tears and challenges culminated in a celebration of victory, reminding everyone that faith, unity, and perseverance can transform even the most difficult obstacles into great achievements. After rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, Nehemiah knew that restoring the city needed to include spiritual reformation. It was essential that the people reconnect with God and reaffirm their commitment to his teachings. Nehemiah called an assembly in front of the water gate, where the people eagerly gathered. With the help of the priest Ezra, he brought out the book of God's law. The reading began at dawn and continued until noon. The words resonated among those present, reminding them of God's history and promises. As they listened, many wept as they remembered how they had strayed from God's teachings. Nehemiah encouraged the people not to be sad, reminding them that the joy of the Lord was their strength. He and Ezra explained the meaning of the law, helping the community understand how to apply its instructions to their daily lives. This practical guidance was essential in helping the people see obedience to God as a path to a fulfilling life. In addition, Nehemiah and Ezra organized religious celebrations, such as the Feast of Tabernacles, which commemorated God's protection during the wilderness journey. These festivities renewed the faith and hope of the community, uniting them in worship. The spiritual reformation became an ongoing movement of rededication to the Lord. The people made promises to follow God's laws and turn away from injustice and idolatry. Nehemiah observed the transformation in hearts and minds, feeling that his mission was coming to fruition. With this reformation, Jerusalem was not just a fortified city, but a community dedicated to serving God. The hope and joy of being in communion with the Lord were alive, preparing Jerusalem for a glorious future under God's protection. Now that we have explored Nehemiah's incredible journey, we want to know, what impacted you most in this story? What lessons did you learn about courage, faith, and overcoming? Leave your comments below. Your opinion is valuable and can inspire others to reflect on the challenges they face in their own lives. Let's create a space for exchange and learning together. I look forward to reading what you have to say. And so, we come to the end of Nehemiah's inspiring story. We saw how he faced enormous challenges and did not let sadness get him down. Instead, he turned his pain into action, uniting his people to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Nehemiah teaches us that we can all make a difference, even when things seem impossible. He showed us that with faith, courage, and a heart willing to serve, we can face any challenge. And most importantly, he reminded us of the importance of unity and commitment to God. So, as we leave here, how about we take these lessons with us? May we be inspired by Nehemiah's courage to overcome our own difficulties and help those around us. After all, together, we can build something much greater than ourselves. Thank you so much for following us on this journey. May Nehemiah's story continue to inspire you to take action and transform your world. And before we say goodbye, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel. That way, you can ensure that you don't miss any of our inspiring stories and valuable teachings. By subscribing, you are becoming part of a community that seeks to grow and strengthen in faith. Join us on this journey of transformation and inspiration, and may we continue to learn together from figures like Nehemiah. Click the subscribe button and see you next time.